Okay, so this is part 2 of chapter 10, and today this chapter is going to, and this lecture is going to talk about attachment. So, attachment is defined as the especially close emotional link that's established between a child and its primary caregiver. Now, this is typically the mother, but it's not exclusively the mother. Um, in many situations, it can be the father or a grandparent or a caregiver. Uh, the idea is that uh, babies form primary attachment with one primary caregiver. Now, this is a biologically based motivational system that has evolved in order to protect children from danger and to motivate caregiving from adults. So, if you think about a baby, they're helpless. Like they have zero skills, they have zero ability to survive without an adult. And therefore, they need to have some sort of evolved mechanism in order to increase their survival. And so, attachment is something that evolved in both babies and adults so that uh, babies are taken care of by adults and that they seek an adult to take care of them. Um, and we know that when babies don't have a primary caregiver or secure attachment, they are at higher risk of filicide. So, filicide is when a child is killed by its mother or father or step parent, some caregiver. And we know that children that have primary caregivers are less likely to die of filicide. And children with a step parent, particularly stepfathers, are 100 times greater risk of being lethally abused, meaning either being killed intentionally or accidental due to neglect or abuse of some other kind. And so, not having a primary caregiver or secure attachment with somebody can be very detrimental to a baby. So, attachment was first proposed by John Bowlby, who realized that babies or infants that were raised in an orphanage tended to die more often than those that were raised by a mother or raised in a home. And so at first it was like, well, maybe those that were raised in an orphanage don't have adequate medical care. And multiple studies essentially found that the babies in the orphanage had adequate medical care. They just didn't get love. They didn't get touch or hugs or kisses or affection. And so the mother raised infants had 0% mortality, and 37% of infants raised in an orphanage died, even though they had adequate medical and nutrition. Now, Bowlby was not the first to talk about the importance of attachment. Konrad Lorenz, who was an ethologist who studied imprinting, which is when a baby duck, for example, follows the first thing it sees, right? It imprints on the mother and therefore it follows the mother. I talked about this earlier. Ducks are not the only ones that do this. But what Lorenz realized is that animals that imprinted on the mother were more likely to survive than animals that either didn't imprint or imprinted on another species, like not the mother. Also, babiness, being young and cute and immature, also increased the chances of survival of many animals. Sorry for the yawns. Another researcher that wanted to understand and test this phenomenon of attachment, this phenomenon of needing love, needing care in order to survive, was Harry Harlow. Harlow, this, by the way, is very sad and highly unethical research now, thankfully, but Harlow separated monkeys at birth from their mothers because he wanted to see if and then he separated them from their mothers and allowed them to be raised by two false mothers. And so the monkey had the choice of a comfortable, soft, nurturing cloth mother, which is this thing right here, kind of creepy. It looks like a really bad arts and crafts project, but nonetheless. Or a cold wire, no animate features mother that had a bottle. So this is the cloth mother, which did not have food but had physical comfort, and then this mother had no physical comfort but had milk, had food, right? And let's see what happens.
Let me show you a monkey raised on a nursing wire mother. Now, here are 106's two mothers. As you can see, it was weaned on a wire mother. Here's baby 106. Watch. He's going to the wire mother. He's got to eat to live. Oh, he's going back. He's back on the cloth mother, and he'll stay on the cloth mother. Actually, this baby spends from 17 to 18 hours a day on the cloth mother and less than 1 hour a day on the wire mother. We had predicted that the variable of contact comfort would be a variable of measurable importance, but we were unprepared to find that it completely overwhelmed and overshadowed all other variables, including those of nursing.
Frankly, Doctor, if it comes to a choice between wire and cloth, it's reasonable to expect that any child will go to the cloth. It's a matter of creature comfort, like a baby with its blanket. But is this really love?
Well, what do you mean by saying that a baby loves its mother? Certainly one thing we mean is that it gets a great feeling of security in the presence of the mother. Now, Mr. Collingwood, wouldn't you say that if you frightened a baby, that it went running to its mother, was comforted, and then all the fear disappeared and was replaced by a complete sense of security that that baby loved its mother? Now, in this experiment, this is the apparatus we use.
That looks diabolical.
That's just the way the baby monkey feels about it. Flashing eyes, loud sound, moving mechanical parts, all of these things are designed to frighten a monkey. Now here we have a peaceful, resting baby monkey. Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him.
He's scared, all right.
And he does what any child will do in a similar situation.
He runs away.
It's more than running away. He was running to his mother, to touch her, to drive away his fear. Contact with the mother changes his entire personality. Look, now he's actually threatening the diabolical object. gives us part of the picture of the strength of infantile love. This is a 6-foot square room with a few toys and other objects. But to the monkey, it's much more menacing. We know that when our own children are taken to a strange place without their mothers, they are often overwhelmed with fear. This room is just such a new and strange environment for the baby monkeys. No mother is in there. Now, let's put a monkey into the room. Notice how cautiously he enters the room. He's searching for comfort, but nothing relieves his disturbance. Now we'll take the baby monkey out and put in a wire mother.
Now, this one was nursed by a wire mother.
That's right, all his life.
She doesn't seem to help much.
Now, we'll try the same test with a cloth mother in the room. You see the contrast in the behavior? Despite the fact that the wire mother nursed him, she could offer this infant nothing in the way of affection or security.
And so, as you can see, attachment is beyond just caregiving, where it's beyond just sustenance, right? Beyond just food, but we have evolved, and monkeys have evolved to experience care and comfort beyond just somebody's feeding you. And so that is necessary in order for us to feel attachment or comfort from our attachment figure. And so Bowlby talked about 4 stages of development. That's pre-attachment, indiscriminate attachment, specific attachment, and reciprocal relationship. And so the first stage, pre-attachment, is between birth and 6 weeks. This is where the baby's just entering into the world, and they are not very discriminate, meaning they don't necessarily differentiate between who they respond to. If someone picks them up, they're perfectly fine. They don't have a preference for any one attachment figure. They're just essentially out in the world trying to figure out who is more common. And so if at that point a grandparent is more common than the mother, or more common than the grandfather, then the grandparent will become the preferred attachment figure later on. Right? In the first 6 weeks, they're just gauging the world. The second stage is indiscriminate attachment. This is from 6 weeks to 8 months. And so this is when the child begins to respond positively to more or less anybody in their world that is quote unquote a normal acting person. This is important because if somebody is abnormal or atypical for the child, then they find that to be aversive. But they would pretty much respond positively to almost any normal acting person. But this is when they start to form preferences. So they might form preferences for the individuals that they see more often. However, they don't necessarily cry when that person is no longer in the room or if they're taken away. That usually begins around 8 months to a year, when specific attachment, the third stage, begins. And in this stage, the child begins to form a clear preference for a primary caregiver or caregivers. Sometimes you can have more than one. They also exhibit separation anxiety and distress and fear of strangers. This is usually when the child is begins to be mobile. So the earlier that they are mobile, the earlier they can move around on their own, the earlier this specific attachment stage emerges. And then once they have their specific attachment figure, their primary attachment figure, um, the fourth stage is reciprocal relationships, which at around 2 years of age, children begin to understand that you can give love as well in order to get love. You can give affection in order to gain attention and affection. And so you have to give in order to get, or to get. You have to get in order to give. And so this is when um, uh, children start to beyond just their primary caregiver, give affection to those that they care about intentionally. So, attachment has the third stage of attachment is usually evidenced by these four um, behaviors. One, separation anxiety. Two, wariness of strangers or stranger danger. And then using their attachment figure as a secure base and a safe haven. So let's first see what separation anxiety looks like. So you may have noticed the boy instantly gets upset when the father, who's the primary caregiver in this case, walks out and is inconsolable, right? If there's toys in the room, the child doesn't care. There's another person in the room, so he's in no danger. And that person, is being nice and saying it's okay. She's not trying very hard, to be honest, but it wouldn't have mattered. She's trying to hug him and he's not having any of it. He's like, lady, go away from me. And he's upset, right? And then the fact that he's comforted by the father when the father comes back means he has secure attachment, which we'll get to in a second. But just this exhibition of separation anxiety when the attachment figure leaves means that they have formed a specific attachment. Stranger danger, or wariness of danger, I don't have a video for that one, is where the child begins to fear those that they don't know. So if they're exposed to a new person, then they may not necessarily want to approach that person. They may not want them to hold them. If that person picks them up, then they start to cry, even if their primary caregiver is there. So they're very wary of strangers, very, very wary of new people. And finally, having a specific attachment figure means they use this attachment person as their secure base and their safe haven. Secure base is another way of saying that the child allows themselves to explore the environment when the attachment figure is there. So if in this case, if the father is in the room, then the child can go and explore the rest of the room because he knows that the father is a secure base. It's kind of like if you've ever played laser tag where you have to go to base and you're safe there. And so you have to go in every once in a while to check in. Oh, okay, I'm good. I can go back out and explore. And safe haven, which is perfectly encapsulated here, right, is when the child is scared, let's say something goes wrong or they get startled or they're not sure of something, they get confused and they get upset, they can go to the attachment figure and use them as a safe haven, essentially seek comfort in that attachment figure, which they do here. And so there are 4 different types of attachment. We can separate the 4 types into 2 categories: secure attachment and insecure attachment. So children, once they have their specific caregiver, it does not mean that they have a good attachment, right? So you can have a specific caregiver that you have insecure attachment to. And so children attach differently to different caregivers, and not all relationships are the same. And so, how do we measure attachment? How do we know whether somebody has secure or insecure attachment? Well, we measure it using what we call the strange situation, which I will show you a video of and then we can talk about.
This experiment, which I watched through a two-way mirror, is designed to gauge how secure is the crucial relationship between mother and child.
Okay, this bunny is going to go here, and that bunny will be on top.
The value of the test has been established in studies that would watch a child, 1-year-old, and then follow it up and interview them about their relationships to their parents when they were 21 years old. So we're quite confident in the long-term significance of this relationship.
After several minutes' play, the mother is signaled to leave the room.
Sweetie, I'll be back in 1 minute, okay? I'll get you back in 1 minute.
It's upsetting for you. Shame, I feel. But she'll survive. The key moment in the experiment is the child's reaction to her mother's return.
Hi.
The important clue is whether the baby's able to become calmed down by the contact with the mother and get back to play. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. But you see, when the mother was out, she was only interested in the mother, no interest in the toys. Now she has a contact with the mother. She's beginning to show a little interest in the environment, and shortly she'll be right back with the toys where we started.
So you would call this a secure one?
Yes, yes.
She's certainly much happier.
Goes to the door following her. Now, we sent the mother right back in, but the point here is not to distress the baby. We're just trying to challenge it. The baby puts her hands to her face, a sad expression, puts her face down. When she picks her up, she keeps her head down, her arms out, and then she sits in the chair holding the baby. The baby's still sullen. He's low-keyed.
So you would call this insecure
Yes,
attachment?
insecure. He's avoidant. He's not engaging her, and the reunion's not effective. And it's important to remember here that the thing that upset him was her absence. Her return should be the solution to his problem. Now, this is another pattern that we see in babies who are not good at using their mother as a secure base at home. This baby is also insecure. But you'll see, we got a look at his play before the separation. Mother's left. When she returns, she picks him up. He can't calm down. He's still upset. She offers a toy to amuse him or to comfort him or to distract him, and he slaps it away. She offers another. He slaps it away. He's angry. We call these babies resistant or ambivalent because they both want her back and yet can't use the contact. We think that the difficulty is that in the past, when he sought comfort, she's been inconsistent as to whether she's available and responsive or not.
And so it's very clear in these 3 examples that you have a child that when they leave, the child gets upset, right? Because they have separation anxiety. So all the children get upset. And then what happens when they come back, and when the parent comes back into the room, that's how we measure or gauge their attachment. And so if the child gets upset, the parent comes back into the room, and the child is able to be comforted, they have secure attachment. They're secure that their parent will come back, that their attachment figure is steady and reliable, and therefore they can trust that they can seek comfort, right? They can use their attachment figure as a secure base and as a safe haven. But the other two, the ambivalent and the resistant, and the avoidant, the children cannot seek comfort. They're not able to use their parent as a safe haven or a secure base because the resistant child is essentially continuing to cry. And the avoidant child is not crying, not angry, but also not comforted either. They just sit there on their lap. They're not crying, they're not hitting her, but they're also not necessarily happy again, right? They're not exploring their environment again. They're just latching onto the attachment figure to see if something will happen. And so we have secure attached babies that actively explore the room. They become upset when the mother leaves, and the mother is greeted warmly on return. The insecure, resistant attached explore little, but they do explore. They appear anxious even in the presence of the mother. They're very preoccupied with where the mother is. They're very distressed when the mother leaves, and they display anger on her return. And avoidant attachment, they show distress, but little, so significantly less. And then they avoid contact on return, or they latch without any emotional connection to the mother or to the attachment figure. The fourth type of attachment is called disorganized. Thankfully, it's very rare, but this is when the child has a mixture of resistant and avoidant attachment. They don't necessarily have any coherent strategy or behavior pattern, but nonetheless, they have an insecure attachment. And so there's lots of cultural variation in terms of attachment. So these are percentages of attachment types: secure, and then the two insecure that we're going to focus on. We don't necessarily see that many that have a disorganized attachment style, so we don't measure that so much. But 67% of U.S. population tend to have secure attachment, 20 to 21%, and then 12% have insecure, avoidant, and resistant. But in Western Europe, for example, similar percentage for secure, but much more likely to have avoidant style of insecure attachment rather than resistant style of insecure attachment. And then the opposite is true in Indonesia, where there's very low percentage for insecure avoidant, and insecure resistant is much higher. And so a lot of this might be due to some norms, social norms of what's typical parenting styles in those environments. So, for example, in Israel, you have 69% secure, so very similar to the United States and Western Europe, but only 3% show avoidant behaviors. 26% show resistance, suggesting that if a parent has insecure attachment, if a child has insecure attachment with their parent, it's more due to the parent being inconsistent, and therefore the child shows anger and crying and resistance of being able to use that parent as a safe haven, and less likely to have a parent that is just ambivalent to them, and therefore they're less likely to have avoidant attachment figures. And so, you can, yeah, we can talk about it. Okay. So there are individual differences in attachment. And so, for example, there's individual differences in availability of attachment figures. So we often think of like, oh, well, if I'm a working mom or a working dad, then my child is not going to be securely attached to me. And that's not necessarily actually the case. When they measured the quality of attachment um, for working and non-working mothers, there was absolutely no difference in percentages or quality of attachment, because it's not about how much time you spend with the child necessarily, but rather how consistent you are and how affectionate you are when you are with the child. Also, there's differences in parental sensitivity to infants and infant cues. So, for example, attachment for children in foster family is a better predictor um, uh, than biological parents. So, this research essentially looked at um, attachment in for children that were given up for adoption, and essentially they found that just because they were given up for adoption did not mean that they have um, insecure attachment. And attachment really is a function of interactional synchrony, which is the coordination of patterns and behaviors between a parent and a child. So essentially, if the parent smiles, the child smiles back, they start a conversation, and their behaviors and emotions are synchronous. One thing that breaks up synchrony is, for example, maternal depression. Maternal depression leads to asynchrony because you essentially have a mom that is not able to reciprocate the relationship, or doesn't have the motivation to reciprocate the relationship and the behaviors that the child might be exhibiting. So if the child is smiling, the mother doesn't necessarily feel very happy, so she doesn't smile back. Therefore, she doesn't interact, and the child is seeking that interaction. So there's an asynchronous pattern of behavior. And therefore, maternal depression usually predicts lower levels of frontal cortex activity in children and a lower synapse rate for these children. And the truth is that attachment is amazing, because secure attachment is associated with literally almost all of the positive outcomes that you could possibly talk about for later on in life. For example, children with secure attachment are more independent and explore the environment, and are more autonomous. They have richer and more organized symbolic play. They're more persistent in problem solving later on. They have better relationships with their peers. They have better relationships with their parents. They have better relationships with their teachers. They have lower levels of internalizing and externalizing emotional problems. They have greater IQs. They have um, happy demeanors later on in life. Like it's associated with all sorts of positive outcomes. Now, associated, I want to make sure we understand that these are, this is just one variable in a whole array of family environmental variables. So think about, it's not causal, it's correlational. But if we think about those that have positive secure attachment, they tend to also probably have a positive family or a positive environment, or maybe other positive variables. That also have an impact on adjustment, not just attachment. So, how is it that early attachment affects later relationships? How is it that there's all these long-term effects? Well, what attachment does is it allows the child to form what we call internal working models. And these are essentially mental representations of how relationships should be and how the world is going to treat you. So it's essentially a set of expectations and beliefs about yourself, the world, and social others. And so it essentially tells you, is the world good? Can I count on other people? Is it safe? Okay. So if the question is, can I count on my attachment figure when I need them? Right. That's the crust, the cusp of attachment, right? Can I count on somebody that is in my environment when I need them? For those who have secure attachment, the answer is yes. You can count on them. For those that are avoidant, the answer is no. Those that tend to have avoidant attachment styles tend to have attachment figures that are either not present or not necessarily able to be used as a secure base or as a safe haven. And if you have a resistant attachment style, then the answer is maybe. Essentially, those that develop resistant attachment styles are those that have an inconsistent attachment figures. And so these answers essentially tell the child how to view their social world, and therefore it impacts future social interactions, including friendships and romantic relationships. Because the idea is that if this is how my family reacts to me, if this is how the people that take care of me react to me, this is how everybody, this is the norm, right? And so the child takes that and creates these mental representations of, well, if my mother's not there for me, my father's not there for me, then nobody's going to be there for me. And so these internal working models essentially predict how children are going to react later on in childhood. So, for example, a securely attached 5-year-old, for example, shows greater emotional understanding and greater frequency of mother-child emotional conversations than those that are insecurely attached. And secure attachment also has a biophysiological component. So, for example, natural opioids, essentially these neurohormonal regulators, such as endorphins, that are associated with reward and punishment, are higher for those that have secure attachment. Similarly, oxytocin, also a neurohormonal regulator associated with love and reduction in stress hormones, is also higher for those that have secure attachment. They also have lower levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So there's lots of components that go into having secure attachment, where the child's body starts to produce these hormones that tell it you're safe, you're fine, you have low stress. So is secure attachment always better, right? If I'm saying that secure attachment is associated with all these positive things, you might think like, oh, well, then everybody that has secure attachment is good, right? They're good. Well, think about where, how, and why attachment exists or even develops, right? It develops based on the child's environment. And so there's a difference between what is good, right? It's obviously good to have secure attachment, and what is adaptive. So insecure attachment is not good because it tells the child that they have an unresponsive or unpredictable environment. But it would be silly if a child has an unpredictable environment or an unresponsive parent for them to form secure attachment. In this case, it is better, right, for them to have an insecure attachment. It is better for them not to trust their attachment figure. And this is because evolution is selected for these conditional adaptations. For the children that have unresponsive, difficult, unpredictable environments, being aggressive or fussy might actually get them more care, might prepare them for difficult interactions with their parents, caregivers, or peers, right? These behaviors are associated with increase in survival, even though they're not necessarily better or good. And that's all we got for attachment. So please make sure that you see part 3 on temperament for this chapter.